My name is Garco. I'm retired after 22 years in the army. I'll take mortars and IED any day, but I've never had anything this bad since I lived in Georgia. I was stationed at Fort Stewart. This was around 1999 to 2001. I was with some friends visiting a nearby store in Hinesville. We were walking around for a bit when we found an Ouija board stacked near some towels. I thought it was weird where it was placed. My friends dared me to buy it. I said okay. I'm not scared of it, as at that time, I believed that Ouija boards are just superstitious beliefs. When I brought it to the cashier, she tried to scan it, but no price came up. She told me it would not register. I told her, okay, can I give you $5 for it? She looked at the box in a weird way and said okay. So I gave her the $5 and left. We took the board to my place and tested it out. We called on spirits, but nothing happened. We tried a couple of times, but nothing. Everyone left shortly afterward. I guess I was right. It was superstition, except that same night, after I went to bed and sleep, I woke up and I could not move. As I opened my eyes, something evil was on top of me. An old woman was pinning me down. I tried to move and push it off, but I couldn't. I then started to pray. I then found the strength to get up and run to my light switch near my door. I then opened my door, and my roommate, who lived in the next room, opened his door too. He asked if I was in his room. I said no. He told me something pulled him out of the bed. I told him about the Ouija board and how I and other friends called on spirits that night. He and I decided to burn the board that night. We tried to burn it with match, but it quickly went out. We thought it was because of what the board and the box were made of. We put it in a barrel and added a whole bottle of gasoline plus scraps of wood and cardboard found nearby. The fire continued to die, but we added more gasoline. It finally went up in flames. As it did, it let out a loud hiss. We both stood back and asked, "Did you hear that?" We both watched and waited till it all burned completely. But maybe burning the board was a mistake. 3 nights later, I had to supervise an early morning urinalysis. I had to walk to work because I did not own a car. I walked through the golf course that was between my apartment and my workplace. It was around 3 in the morning. I had to show up before everyone else and set things up. That's when I saw it. Halfway through the golf course, it was just standing there. I thought it could be from a statue, but when I looked around, I could not see anything that could make that type of shadow. I was puzzled for what seemed to be 2 or 3 minutes. I tried to figure out what it could be. It was the figure of a man, or the person, but only a shadow. I moved left and right, but it stood perfectly still. At this point, I curiously walked towards it. I'm a soldier. I spent 4 years in the army at this point. I'm not scared of much. However, when I walked forward, the shadow lunged at me. It scared me completely. I turned around and ran back to my place. I ran for 2 minutes before looking back. When I did look back, it was gone. Nothing was there. I stood there for a few seconds trying to figure out where it went. I knew I had to get back to work, so I started jogging back towards my workplace. I looked back where I first saw the shadow figure, but it was gone. I started to run after that all the way to work. That's when occurrences came from time to time, but that's another story. My name is Bob and I work as a cashier at 7-Eleven. One night, after my shift ended, a group of my friends invited me to join them over for a spiritual session using the Ouija board. Being skeptical and a non-believer in the paranormal, I told my friends that it was not real and the only reason I am coming along is to prove my point. Fast forward, we set up the board in the living room of one of my friend's house. We dimmed the lights and we sat in a circle around the board. My friends began to ask the board questions, starting with the basic ones like, "Is anyone there?" and "What is your name?" To my surprise, the pointer on the board began to move and spell out answers. At first, The answer seemed innocent enough, and we were all laughing and joking around as we continued to ask questions. I, being the skeptic guy, asked the board if it was real or just our imagination. The pointer spelled out, "I am real." This sent shivers down my spine a little bit, but I still had my doubts. I was pretty sure it was one of us moving the pointer around. Then suddenly, the mood in the room shifted. My friends began to look uneasy, and I started to regret coming along with them when the pointer moved at a disturbing speed and spelled out that someone in the room was going to die and we should all be careful. We all looked at each other, and I could see fear in my friends' eyes. Suddenly, the pointer moved to goodbye, and the session was over. We all sat in silence for a moment, unsure of what in the world had just happened. As we left the room, my friends and I discussed the strange and unsettling experience that we just had. On my way home, I kept looking around as I have this uneasy feeling that someone was following me even though no one was there every time I looked. I didn't sleep well that night, and I avoided using the Ouija board ever again. The incident with the Ouija board had left a profound impact on me. I couldn't help but think about it constantly, even when I was at work. And at home at night, I started to experience vivid nightmares. They were so realistic that I could barely tell if I was awake or asleep. In my dreams, I would see a dark figure standing at the end of my bed, staring at me with empty eyes. It has been years since we messed with the paranormal, yet the memory of that night still haunts me to this day, and I would never recommend anyone to use the Ouija board. It is not a game. It is not something to take lightly. It's something that should be avoided at all costs. My name is Jessica Lee, and I'm an engineering student. I had always been interested in the paranormal and had heard many stories about the Ouija board. I was fascinated by the idea of communicating with spirits and decided to try it out for myself. So I went to an occult shop and bought this ominous board that is said to be a portal from our world to the spirit world. One night, my friends and I gathered in my dorm to test out my Ouija board for the first time. We turned off the lights and lit a candle. We placed our fingers on the planchette and asked if there were any spirits present. To our surprise, the planchette moved and spelled out the name Emily. We then laughed and made jokes due to the coincidence that one of our friends playing with us is also named Emily. We decided to play along and asked the spirit named Emily if she had a message for us. The planchette spelled out "Beware." We laughed it off and continued to communicate with her. However, as the night went on, the messages from Emily became darker and more sinister. The planchette spelled the words, "Warning, friend watching. Stop immediately, or friend will kill." We ignored her warnings, thinking it was just one of us moving the planchette, trying to scare us. After a few more questions, he packed the board and placed it in my closet. Ever since that night, strange things began to happen in my dorm room. Objects would move on their own. I am a very tidy person, and I always remember where I place my things. But most of the time, I will find my things in a different location in my room from where I originally placed it. Also, strange noises would come from the walls, like someone was knocking or scratching from the other side. And the worst part, I would wake up in the midnight to find scratches on my body. I knew that I had to put an end to this before it was too late. I gathered my friends and told them about the strange occurrences in my dorm room. They said that the same things is happening to them as well, and we even compared scratches. I suggested that we burn the board, but one of my friends stopped me and said that we should never burn an Ouija board. So we googled stuff about the Ouija board, and we definitely forgot one of the most important rules. That is to always say goodbye after you're done speaking with the spirit. And maybe that's the reason why the spirit was still there. So I took the board out of my closet, placed it in the table, and we turned off the lights and lit the leftover candle from our last game. We then placed our fingers on the planchette and asked if Emily was still there. We got scared when it spelled yes. This time, no one was laughing. We then said goodbye to Emily and told stories until everyone got tired and left. Ever since we said goodbye, the strange occurrences in my dorm room have stopped. However, I still have nightmares about Emily and get paranoid every time I'm alone in my dorm. I guess I learned the hard way that the Ouija board should not be taken lightly and there are real dangers associated with it. I will never use it again, and I urge others to be cautious when experimenting with the paranormal. The Ouija Board's Deadly Consequence, a demonic possession horror story. It was a dark and stormy night, and Jane had been driving for hours through the winding deserted roads of the countryside. She had been visiting her sick grandmother at the hospital and was now on her way back home. As the rain pounded against the windshield and the wind howled through the trees, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but all she could see was darkness. Finally, she saw a faint glow of the city skyline in the distance and let out a sigh of relief. But as she entered the city limits, the car suddenly died. Jane panicked, trying to start the engine, but it was no use. She was stranded on the side of the road. She fumbled for her phone, but the battery was dead. Just as she was about to get out of the car and start walking, she saw a pair of headlights approaching in the distance. She flagged down the car, hoping that it was a good Samaritan who could help her. The car stopped and a man got out, dressed in all black and wearing a wide-brimmed hat. He had a sinister air about him, but Jane was desperate and didn't have any other options. She explained her predicament and the man offered to give her a ride to the nearest gas station. As they drove, the man began to tell Jane about an ancient evil that lived in these woods. He said that it was a demon, summoned by a group of teenagers playing the Ouija board years ago. The demon had possessed one of the teenagers and now roamed the woods, looking for a new host to inhabit. Jane laughed it off as a silly superstition, but the man's words lingered in her mind. When they arrived at the gas station, the man insisted in filling up her tank himself. As he was pumping the gas, Jane saw him slip something into the gas tank. She confronted him, and the man's face twisted into a demonic snarl. He revealed that he was the demon, searching for a new host, and now it had found one in Jane. The demon possessed Jane's body and she was never seen again. Some say that on dark stormy nights, you can still see her car driving through the countryside, with the demon at the wheel searching for its next victim.